Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here. I'm doing a video tonight, and this is kind of a combination video between my thoughts on the recent Trump raid on Trump's residence in Mar-a-Lago by the FBI, as well as the new documentary that is actually on Amazon right now about Alex Jones, even though I don't know if that's a ticking time bomb waiting to be removed by censorship or whatnot, because I would not be surprised if the powers that be removed that video. But I got to see it, thankfully, in time, so I got it. But this is just kind of a general thought on this whole, just the whole Trump thing. It just kind of bothers me now. Now, I don't know what the impetus of this, like I've said before, I don't know what the hype in some ways about Trump is pro, as well as I don't get the hysteria con. Either way, I don't understand the whole Trump phenomenon in many ways. I don't really get it. No, I think he's funny unintentionally and sometimes intentionally. Now, I do think, I am starting to believe this, though, and this is a controversial statement even coming from me, that in light of a lot of what I've seen, especially from that documentary, just thinking about this, and I do not think, some of these things are true that they claim and stuff, and I do think the powers that be are threatened by him in a real way, and justified by, people wanting to keep their power way, and exactly. And it doesn't mean that he's even that much anti-establishment or a real populist or anything like that. But I think there's something that threatens them. And I'm trying to think about what it is exactly. And that's kind of what's making me think about this tonight, because I do think that they are threatened by him. And, whatever you want to call them, global elites. I think it's also, now that I'm thinking it through, I think it's almost like a lot of times during the Cold War. So this is what would happen. I've talked about this in videos before. There would be a nationalist movement in a third world country, and the United States would do as much as they could to suppress that nationalist movement. And among some of the nationalist movement in said country, there would be people infiltrating it on the side of the Soviet Union or Marxists or whatever. And by forcing the hand of this movement to have those people, they basically forced the hand of this country or movement to go into the arms of the Soviet Union. And why I think this is relevant with this is basically, it doesn't matter that Trump is a doofus, con artist, liar, or whatever. It's the fact that he threatens their bottom line in a way, in any sort of way, that threatens these people. It threatens the elites. And this is kind of a realization I had tonight. And this is really what I think about why they're going after him. Because believe me, I think he's guilty as anybody that's a politician of lies and crimes and corruption. But the problem is a lot of the lies and corruption that he's guilty of, other people have done and get away with it all the time. It's carte blanche not Hollywood, in Washington, D.C. So that's kind of what I think about that. And this is kind of a realization I had tonight watching that documentary. Now, the first half of the documentary, I really like, because that gives me nostalgia for the old school InfoWars days, pre-2012 pretty much. Like I used to watch, a lot of that. And I bought into a lot of the Alex Jones thing. And overall, I think his overarching premise, or the macro narrative and analysis, is actually pretty correct about what's going on right now. I do think it's true. Now, I think the conspiracy theorists' flaw is not allowing for fluidity within that realm, because they don't believe that there's any human foibles amongst these people, or that they think that they put maybe a little bit too much power into these figures, like the Klaus Schwabs and the Bill Gates, or the Zuckerbergs of the world or whatever. So I think they simultaneously, it's kind of like with Trump, they give him way too much like power. Actually, they're worse with Trump because they believe he's like the all powerful Satan or whatever. So I think it's kind of like that. And so by all means, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I think that the global elites are threatened by him. They're threatened by the example, just like Chomsky used to say, of someone being a nationalist or populist, or wanting to close off the United States to the world community, which they want the overarching power over, because they do want globalization, they do want global governance of some sort, and usually by the billionaire elites, of course. And that's why we all should be resolute in our opposition to this, because it's not about democracy. It's about an illusion of this world order, when it's basically it is tyranny. These elites that are trying to take over, because they have these global organizations and they're unelected many times, and they go through different presidents. I mean, like, let's say, for example, and I'm not saying Fauci is part of this, I don't know if he is or not, but I'm just saying Fauci was under 12 presidents, or not 12 presidents, like 8 different presidents. A lot of these bureaucrats are unelected, but they want more power for these unelected bureaucrats. That's what they want. And these people serve the billionaire class, So that's what the threat is, and the threat of that, and whether or not Trump is a bad person in other ways, which he is, whether or not or if you don't believe he is, that's fine too. Just saying, whether or not he is irrelevant, because he poses the threat to that power. I mean, some of these dictators in these countries, or not dictators, some of these new nationalist movements were terrible during the Cold War. Some of them were not really populist movements, and when it came down to it. Pol Pot, for example, I mean, he rallied his troops because Vietnam was the war in Vietnam had affected his country, and he had propaganda, effective propaganda to bring people to his cause. He was certainly not a benign figure of of nationalism. Terrible person, but it's like, and the irony is the United States actually later kind of tacitly supported him because he was against Vietnam. So really kind of shattering the lie that America actually cares about these countries' citizens. They care more about the power and the global power structure of corporatism and access to resources and so on. So that's kind of what that's about. So that's kind of what I think the Trump thing is, a threat to that global power. Whether, even if he was Orange Hitler, let's say. Orange Hitler, but an isolationist or Orange Hitler, it wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter what he is. The fact that he's isolationist, I'm not saying he's isolationist, but even on a little bit of a level, that he has any of those tendencies is a threat to these people. I think Bernie would probably have the same problem if he would have been elected. But I think he's kind of a useful tool for idiots now. I mean, I hate to say that, I supported him, but I think he had a similar, if he would have followed through on all the stuff he was about, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, etc., he would have been a threat to their power too. Or Ralph Nader would. Ron Paul certainly would. And it's not even, those people are economically diametrically different than each other. But as far as on the world stage, they're not, if you see what I'm saying. So on the world stage, they do not like these unaccountable agreements, or for the most part. They don't, they don't like these trade agreements or these global organizations. Because there is the tendency for power to corrupt, absolutely. And these global organizations, the bureaucracy that's created by them just is inherently problematic. I hate to use that word. But anyways, that's what I got to say about that. I think like this FBI raid. You know, they're trying to find something on Trump. They're going a little more aggressive because they're really afraid of his followers and and the power he has over people. And it's not, to me, it's not even about what he is about. Like, it's not even about him being who he is. It's more, he's a threat to their power structure, even on a small level, even if he buys into some of it too. I mean, he was at a WEF meeting, for fuck's sake, too. But anyways, that's about all.